After reading the most recent Dengeki article that came out in Japan, not gonna lie to you, I kind of have a lot of thoughts behind PSO2, and it feels like a lot of the things that they're doing right now are currently outdated. A lot of people can agree that base PSO2 was a phenomenal game, albeit it had a lot of issues when it comes to balancing as well as some of the content rollouts over the years. But one of the major things that happened in this Dengeki article is it confirmed the rumor that happened back in 2017 where half of the staff was then put on a brand new project that was Phantasy Star related. 2017 was also one of the lowest points when it comes to Phantasy Star Online 2, being that it was available in episode 5. And for a lot of Japanese players, episode 5 was the lowest point, even lower than Phantasy Star Online 2's episode 4. However, episode 5 came with a lot of quality of life enhancements that would ultimately make the game better in the long run. It also made Sega understand the concept of the reporting feature that was then available in-game at the time of episode 5, as well as on their official websites. There are a lot of things that happened during episode 5 that players didn't exactly enjoy, but ultimately it made the game better in the long run. And in my personal opinion, episode 5's conclusion was probably one of the better in all of the episodes, with the exception of episode 6 in its second half, where basically it starts getting into the space opera that we all know and love, Phantasy Star 2B. But back in 2017, they split the team in half to be able to create two games, Phantasy Star Online 2, and then also begin New Genesis. It finds it reason to believe that during this time they actually wanted New Genesis to be its own standalone game, but after constant talk between back and forth within the design team, they decided to be able to make it link into base PSO2, so that way players who've been playing the game for 9 years would be able to enjoy everything that they've come to, pick up. All the money that they've spent would eventually be worthwhile, considering they could just take it into New Genesis. In these articles, they then go on to say that the content rollout for major updates will be every 6 months, comparatively to the every 2 weeks micro updates that they were doing with base PSO2. However, if you ask me, there's a problem in that design theory in and of itself, where the development team might actually be a lot better and a lot more motivated to get work done. The problem becomes, are they actually able to deliver enough content in those time periods that when the next 6 months rolls around and nothing new is introduced, will players still willingly want to enjoy the game? They mentioned in the article that they understand that players want to take breaks and enjoy other games, and that's all then fine. However, if we want to use other games that have similar design theories like Final Fantasy XIV, the biggest issue is that that game delivers enough content that when the player comes back and during a major update, there is enough to do for the several months after. There's life skills, there's dungeons, there's raids, there's everything that's coming out, and it's like it's a rollout, and there's a massive amount of things that are able to be done and grind for. One of the unique things that happens when a game like Final Fantasy XIV takes that approach is that none of the content that they've introduced previously is then out of date. One of the problems that base PS2 had is that beyond a certain point, once you start achieving certain gear levels, you basically have no reason to run any of the older content. There were no unique weapons or items that were available in specific missions where that would be the reason why you ran that specific mission. Eventually, once you got to a certain gear level, 90% of the game was currently obsolete. They go on to say things like they're going to release side stories that are going to be available every 2 to 4 months in Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, but currently, as of right now, the way that it seems like is that their current side stories are only going to last anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. Ideally, that's like waiting 2 months or 2 to 4 months for someone to give you a pack of crackers and some cheese and then say, here's your full course meal, enjoy. It's amazing to me when I start seeing things that happen in Phantasy Star Online 2 that I've seen happen in other games previously that currently went out of business. Phantasy Star Online 2 has already been successful for the last 9 years and is currently at the lowest rated point in the game's history. While the flip side to that is newer players as well as long-term players, when New Genesis launched, understood that the game had the bare bones to be an incredibly well loved and received game, because the combat as well as a lot of the mechanics and features are in fact better than some of the things that were available back in base PSO2. Continue the food analogy, basically when they released Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, they said, here's the steak, but we forgot the potatoes. So where unfortunately where you would have had a full meal, you only have half of that. And unfortunately, they didn't even give you bread to be able to make a steak sandwich if that's what you wanted instead. So when I look at a game like Phantasy Star right now, I as much as I enjoy the combat and the way that the game feels and looks, I kind of feel like there's really nothing to do, which only adds into the idea that there's not enough content in the game. Another fascinating thing that I wound up seeing in these two articles was they wound up saying that urgent quests weren't really meant to be part of the progression system. I mentioned this back in one of the earlier prologue streams during the announcement of the game, where they said that urgent quests were not meant to be the end-all be-all epitome of content where that's where you would get all of your upgrades. And while they remain true to that philosophy, the problem is they still continue releasing content that is in the urgent quest variety. But the problem that you then have with urgent quests is that there's no reason to run them because everything that's available in these quests are now available in the rest of the world, basically putting time and development systems into something that ultimately will not be played or even enjoyed, because most players will then say, well, what's the point? Times like this, I think back to things like Phantasy Star Universe or even Phantasy Star Online 1, where there were missions that may necessarily not be good for progression, but they had an item or a weapon or something cosmetic that I would then want out of that mission that would honestly be worthwhile doing. While I understand trigger quests are going to be a thing soon, where basically we'll be able to spawn the urgents at times that we really want, we don't necessarily have to wait for them to spawn at any given point. It doesn't alleviate the fact that urgent quests are widely unnecessary to the entire game system. Basically, you wind up creating all these systems for people to enjoy when no one's going to want to, because there's no exclusive loot or even a reason to run them. There's not even a special augment series or even a weapon series or maybe cosmetics that are available in these urgents. So when I start looking at the game, I feel like it's a mismanagement of priorities, kind of like how I said before in my previous video about communication. And another thing when it comes to the communication, the problem is with these current articles that detail a lot of this information that the entire player base should know, that it feels like to me that they're sweeping this under the rug because now this isn't available in any official publication on the Sega websites, whether it be in the global side or even on the Japanese side. This is a third-party interview that is only available on the Dengeki website, not even available anywhere else, and even if they advertise it on the Rappi Komu Twitter page, most players will never see this. So it only further adds to my animosity when it comes to the game's current state and how they're treating one of their most successful franchises in Sega history. This isn't to say that they don't have any other successful franchises, because as a publisher, they then publish two other successful franchises, which would then be Yakuza as well as the Persona series. The crazy thing is that Sega as a publisher is doing incredibly well, but Sega as a developer is kind of not. However, this is a very different side of Sega that we wound up seeing now, considering the fact that their global team is widely communicative as well as they're very easy to talk to. The problem is that the global team behind Phantasy Star Online 2 has their hands tied because they need to get approval for certain things to be able to talk about certain information regarding the game and its development. So where it feels like they're trying to get Hiro Arai, the official navigator of the game, to be able to say, hey, this is the only things you can talk about, they still have a lot of ways to improve when it comes to the level of communication that they currently have. That doesn't necessarily mean anything for the lack of content in the game, because you can improve your communication all you want, but when you then say that you're going to be releasing major updates every 6 months and then side stories every 2 to 4 months with your current track record based on the release of the game, doesn't necessarily bode well. And when I use other games as an example, for in this case I'm going to use Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is a game company where basically they've only developed 2 other games previously, one mobile puzzle game and then Honkai Impact before that. Honkai Impact still one of the most successful mobile games that are currently available at the moment, as well as Genshin Impact only continuing to rise. But if I use these games as an example, I have to tell you why. And the reason why I use a lot of these games as an example is because of the open world format that is available to them at the time, as well as the distribution in terms of content. Basically with Genshin Impact, what they do is they release a live stream that's going to happen every 2 months, every 3 months, where they then introduce the new mechanics that are going to be available within that update patch. And a lot of these things will then be faded out completely because there'll be events that are associated with this, so they don't come back. However, it still gives players a reason to log in on a week-to-week basis, while still respecting their time enough to be able to say, hey, we have these systems in place so that way you can take a break if you really wanted to. So using games that are widely popular right now like Genshin Impact and Final Fantasy XIV, you can definitely see the difference when you see the design philosophy when it comes to Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. But a lot of players are leading to believe is one of two things. It's either the director or that Sega currently has an outdated mentality when it comes to the success of their game, because 9 years ago they were able to release a game that was pretty bare bones and then update it to where we know it is now today. But let's say that they were using that same philosophy where they can update the game slowly over time and then eventually make this really fleshed out game 9 years in the future. But that becomes its own issue because that's an outdated mentality. You cannot complete a game nowadays the same way that you would have 9 years ago. Even long-term games that are of the MMO variety that are still around to this day have adapted to introducing either more content or larger patches to be able to satiate their communities. However, a lot of them still meet the golden standard of maybe 3 to 4 content patches every single year. So it leads me to believe that I'm not sure if Sega actually knows what's going on with their own game and how to continuously market things in a positive light. Personally, what I would like them to do is when they introduce trigger quests, give every single urgent the item or something that makes them worthwhile to run. And what I would like them to do is actually bring back the personal shop system for free-to-play players. In addition, what I would then enjoy them to do even further further beyond that is to then remove the motions from the $90 package or the 45 pull package when it comes to these AC scratches, and maybe going back into putting an exclusive emote in that place instead, because the movements that are available in ACs are widely more popular than the emotes were. But if you force people to spend $100 to $120 depending on their country, or even $400 again depending on their country, nobody wants to do that. Some people may in fact would love to be able to drop maybe 20-30 bucks, have a chance at getting the item that they want, like a motion in this case, or having the ability to then farm the Meseta to be able to then buy it off of other players. When you lock a majority of the motions and idle poses and other things of that variety behind an infinite paywall and then release one every single week, it becomes a problem, and players will take that the incredibly wrong way. And then what I would like is to see that communication that they currently have with news publications in Japan, and then use that same communication level to then use that over in the global side of things. Maybe even take these news publications and then with permission also publish them on their own websites, or give the global version a translated version, while then also saying to the Japanese player base, hey, you can visit the Dengeki website here. Ultimately, what I look for in Phantasy Star Online 2 right now is I'm looking for more things to do outside of the randomized content that we currently have. Then in addition to that, I would like their communication to be better and their monetization system to be more friendly towards the free-to-play players as well as their own whales. And for those of you guys who might be new to these sort of systems, a whale is basically somebody who spends an exorbitant amount of money, because I'm sure a lot of people would enjoy the game more if all of these systems were definitely more accessible. What I'm very happy about when it comes to this article is that they are looking to do things like Cocoons having very exclusive content that are with the quote-unquote end game. But as of right now, I feel like they're making the same mistakes, that even if they were to introduce new content, basically everything that's going to be and then previously introduced will then become incredibly out of date, and we're still going to be falling into the same problems that we currently have. So with that being said, I hope, I get my point across a little bit better this time. I love Phantasy Star. I love the series. I've been a fan of it for the very longest time that I can remember. I'm incredibly unhappy with the current state of the game and with things going on. I've been trying to be the positive light. We're saying Sega's not all that bad. Maybe Sega's doing this. Maybe Sega can do better, because I don't want to be the negative Nancy, unlike a lot of my friends who have been forced into that position. But as of right now, I feel like this is the only way to get my point across, is by proving to them that I understand their current track record and then saying you're fucking up. But yeah, that's basically where I'm at right now. Anyway, thank you guys again for listening. I'm going to be leaving a link down to the Dengeki articles down below, so you guys can go ahead and look at them for yourselves, because I make reference to them quite a few times in this video. With that going on, thank you guys again for watching. As always, stay awesome, stay beautiful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. I'm out.